Kuro Neko, The Alternate Ending by Christina Cheng. Catwalker lowered his head. I just couldn't stand the thought of things continuing on the way they were. I wasn't really thinking. All I knew was that Ladybug didn't need me anymore, which meant there was no point in me trying to do anything, or to even use a cat Miraculous at all. Marinette's eyes widened, and she struggled to think of something to say, but Catwalker continued. That's what I thought at the time, anyway. Looking back, it wasn't that I wanted it all to end. I just wanted things to change, and didn't know how to do that. Oh, Cat Noir. She touched his arm sympathetically, and he turned to look at her. I'm so sorry you were feeling that way. But why didn't you talk to Ladybug? He shrugged slightly. I tried talking to her a little bit, but... Marinette cut him off knowingly. Oh, really? You said, hey, Ladybug, I feel like you don't need me anymore, and I can't stand things the way they are to the point I want to give up my Miraculous? He grinned sheepishly and shifted in his perch on the railing. Well, no. I guess I didn't really talk to her about it as well as I should have. Exactly. You should have said something before just running off and leaving her alone without a clue of what happened, Marinette exclaimed, before remembering to check her emotions to that of an outside observer rather than someone involved. I mean, how is Ladybug supposed to know something is bothering you if you don't tell her? Catwalker sighed. I know. It's just, Ladybug never has time to listen to me. And it's the same way with my father. I care deeply for both of them, and I know they have a lot to deal with, so I try not to add to their burdens by sharing mine. But it's more than that. I feel like no one will listen to me. The outcome will still be the same, so what's the point in having anything to say? Marinette noticed his fist tighten against the metal bars, and his chest moved unevenly as he struggled to remain calm. My father controls everything for me. He says he does it to protect me, but sometimes he tries to protect me from my friends, or even from going to school without any reason to hold against them. He never listens to what I have to say about it. He ignores me most of the time, then expects me to just drop everything whenever he has a new idea for a project he wants me to work on. As soon as he makes a decision, there's no changing it, and I feel like I'm trapped in a life that I never wanted. As Cat Noir, I finally had a chance to escape, free to help people, care for people, make my own decisions, and be part of a team. But since Ladybug became the guardian, she's making all the decisions while leaving me stuck in the dark. Everything's already been decided, while I'm just cheese on the platter, waiting to be used. Marinette scrunched her eyebrows. What is it with all these Cat Noir's cheese analogies? But she quickly brushed that aside, and her heart ached as she heard how deeply he was struggling. I know Ladybug's responsibilities are different from mine, and she knows better than I do when it comes to strategies and making plans. But lately, it's really been getting on my nerves. I know it sounds selfish and childish, but I wanted to pay more attention to me. Back when it was the two of us, Ladybug was one of the first and only people who really listened to me. She valued my opinion, and we supported each other in ways that no one else could. I'd make jokes, and she'd get annoyed, but usually she smiled too, and sometimes she even joked back. But lately, she's been so busy taking care of all the other heroes, she never has time to talk to me. And everything I do only seems to make her mad. That's kind of what happened earlier. I almost didn't go to the battle because what's the point if Ladybug doesn't need me? Ty convinced me to go anyway, so I did, but when I got there, it had already been taken care of without me. I tried to hide my hurt and met with Ladybug, but she was preoccupied with recovering the Miraculouses and blew me off as usual. I offered to help with something to save her time, which was when she yelled at me and said I should stop wasting her time in the first place. Marinette's cheeks flushed as she remembered snapping at him, and the sting of hearing his angry voice call after her. I left my Miraculous there for her to find, which, looking back, was a very unreasonable and irresponsible thing to do. I was just so frustrated, and as terrible as it sounds, I think a small part of me wanted to make her feel sorry I was gone, while the rest of me was convinced she'd be better off without me. Marinette leaned heavily against the guardrail beside him. There's one thing I don't get. If you were so upset with Ladybug, enough to give up your role as Cat Noir, why did you become Catwalker? A small smile flickered at the corner of his eyes. Well, Well, that was Plag's idea mostly. Marinette pressed a hand against her forehead. Of course it was. Catwalker looked over at her questioningly. I mean, it would be strange to change your mind so quickly on your own. What was the idea exactly? Catwalker turned his gaze toward the stars. He told me that after all the time he spent with her, he knew what kind of a cat Ladybug wanted, and said that if I became him, I would be irreplaceable, and Ladybug would never want to leave me out again. What? Marinette exclaimed loudly, her eyes narrowing intently. Plag told you to become someone different just so Ladybug would like you better? Well, it's not completely different from how I am at home, but yeah. I thought that if I could be everything Ladybug wanted, things would get better. And it sort of worked, but didn't. Marinette's head spun in disbelief as she struggled to respond, but Catwalker continued. It started off really well. Ladybug seemed impressed with my performance, and I knew all the little things would get her to trust me. But something was still missing. I should have been happy that she seemed to like me and gave me more attention than usual. It's just, even though we spent all that time together, we weren't really partners the way we usually are. And the whole time I was worried that she'd figure me out and reject me all over again. I know she hates lying, and I wasn't trying to lie. I just wanted a chance for things to change. I was afraid it would work too, though. Luckily, she told me to give the ring back to, well, me. But what if she'd like Catwalker better? Then I'd have to keep pretending for the rest of my life. Or at least until she figured it out and made me give up my Miraculous on her own. Marinette had been listening in stunned silence, but her eyes quickly hardened and an indignant look flashed across her face. Cat Noir. She grabbed him roughly by the shoulders and dragged him off the banister, causing him to stagger to his feet in surprise. Listen to me, Cat Noir. You don't have to pretend to be someone you're not. Ladybug doesn't want that, and neither should you. Of course you're not happy with being Catwalker. Having to put up a front all the time, worrying that your true self will be discovered, feeling like you may be stuck pretending forever, that would wear away at anyone. And even if Ladybug was impressed by Catwalker, that doesn't mean she isn't impressed by you. So what if you aren't stoic and insightful all the time? You're funny, daring, playful, sweet, and no one could ever be like you, Cat Noir. Ladybug knows that. And what she thinks shouldn't matter. You're incredible just the way you are, and you don't need approval from Ladybug to understand that. Her voice grew gentler, and she placed a hand lightly on his arm. Don't lose yourself, Cat Noir. Ladybug is lucky to have you, and she wouldn't want you to change into anyone else, especially if it's some imagined character that Plag made up. Catwalker had been listening quietly, a timid hope growing in his eyes, and he smiled a bit at the mention of Plag's misguided scheme. You really think so? I know so. He studied her carefully, then smiled. Thanks, Marinette. You're a pretty incredible person too, you know. She shrugged dismissively, but Catwalker took hold of her shoulders and stared earnestly down at her, reminding her of earlier that night when he had done so on the Eiffel Tower. To Ladybug, of course. I mean it, Marinette. You're an incredible girl. Creative, kind, always looking out for others. I'm lucky to have known you, and I really appreciate the times we spent together. Marinette blinked, her mind half frozen as she stared up into Catwalker's eyes, then stepped back with a grateful smile. I enjoy our times together too. She glanced away, tugging her arm shyly. And thanks. Catwalker nodded, then reluctantly turned his gaze to the brightening sky. I should probably get going. It's been a long day, and I think we could both use some sleep. Sorry to have kept you up so late. Marinette brushed him off with a smile. Don't worry about it. I was up anyway. Catwalker's eyes widened in concern. Oh, that's right. You were upset about how your friend's cat ran away. He paused, then looked down as he asked, Do you think Ladybug is angry with me for leaving too? Marinette shook her head. Well, she probably wasn't too happy about it. She stepped closer and placed a comforting hand on his arm. But no matter how upset someone is when their kitten runs away, they're always happy to get them back. He smiled and nodded appreciatively, then shot himself out into the night. And the fact that Cat Noir made you blush and stare more all night has nothing to do with it? What? I was not blushing. It was a warm night and we were doing a lot of running around, and Anyway, that's totally beside the point. Marinette crossed her arms defensively and moved away from Tiki in an attempt to hide the emotions written on her face as her mind drifted back to the events of the night. Still, he was so thoughtful and gentlemanly as Catwalker. I almost dared to imagine he was. She glanced at a photo of Adrian hanging beside her desk and felt a warmth grow in her cheeks. She quickly shook herself, and the wistfulness faded from her voice. But it was Cat Noir all along. And I think Plague told him to change himself just to charm me. Who does that? Wait a minute. She narrowed her eyes and turned to face the small Kwame, who froze guiltily. You knew about this. Tiki, how could you? Tiki shifted nervously. Well, you were both struggling so much and on the verge of separating, we couldn't do nothing. Plague's idea seemed like a good one at the time. It would allow you to have a partner and Cat Noir to still spend time with you. But that wasn't fair to me or Cat Noir. And now poor Cat Noir thinks I'll only like him if he acts like this perfect person all the time. And I probably made it worse with all the compliments I gave to him as Catwalker. Tiki looked down. I'm sorry, Marinette. I shouldn't have known not to go along for one of Plague's crazy schemes. Marinette cupped her hands around her. I know you meant well, Tiki. I just feel so bad for Cat Noir. When he gave up his Miraculous, I thought it was just because I kept rejecting his feelings. But it's so much more than that. Tiki nodded sadly. What are you going to do, Marinette? Marinette lifted her head, a determined look growing in her eyes. I'll meet up with him tomorrow and make sure he knows how much he means to me. Tiki raised an eyebrow. As a partner and close friend, of course, Marinette added hastily. I can't be in love with him, but that doesn't mean he has to feel left out or unimportant. The Kwame nodded approvingly, and Marinette began getting ready for bed, eager for the night to be over so she could meet with Cat Noir. As she slid beneath the covers, Tiki flew over to a spot beside her pillow and said, You know, it's really special that the two of you are friends even when you're not both heroes. Marinette turned to her in surprise. What do you mean by that, Tiki? Well, he clearly trusts you even without your mask. And if Cat Noir had never told Marinette how he was feeling, Ladybug might never have had a chance to find out. Marinette furrowed her brow. Yeah, come to think of it, he really should have told me all that directly instead of keeping it to himself for so long. Well, you haven't always told him everything you're feeling either. Marinette couldn't argue with that, her mind jumping back to a specific instance a few months ago, when she dragged him to the pool after insisting she didn't have a heartbreak and everything was completely fine. He hadn't argued with her, just followed along and let her know that he was there if she needed him. Tiki hovered closer. What I'm saying is the bond the two of you share is truly extraordinary and something that can't be filled by anyone else. Marinette's eyes drifted sideways as she remembered how desperately she had tried to find a replacement Cat Noir, and the underlying ache of knowing that such a task was impossible. A small smile crept across her face as she remembered they would see each other after school, and she lightly tickled a finger against Tiki's small stomach. You're right, Tiki, and tomorrow I'm going to make sure Cat Noir knows it too. Ladybug looked out over the warm yellow sky as she waited for Cat Noir at their usual rendezvous point. A familiar click sounded behind her, followed by footsteps as Cat Noir landed on the rooftop and made his way over. She knew he probably thought she was angry with him for giving up his Miraculous, and part of her was, so she kept her gaze on the sunset as he settled down on the ledge beside her. I've been a really temperamental kitty, m'lady. I was feeling pretty useless, and I was frustrated because I felt like you had never had time for me anymore. But a friend made me realize that I should never have run off like that, and I didn't think of how my absence would affect you. Ladybug smiled slightly to herself, then said solemnly, I haven't been a great partner lately either. I know I've been pretty harsh with you at times, and that wasn't cool. Your absence did affect me, Cat Noir. When I found your ring on the rooftop, I didn't know what to think. I was devastated, and really angry too. Cat Noir glanced over at her, his eyebrows raised in tentative surprise. She lightly smacked her arm against his. And that was a terribly irresponsible place to put it, too. What if Shadow Moth had been nearby? Cat Noir chuckled nervously as he rubbed a hand over his neck. Yeah, sorry. That was a really bad call on my part. But hey, with such a good guardian around, I knew it would be safe. Ladybug rolled her eyes, then grew serious as she said, I'm sorry, Cat Noir. I should have realized something was bothering you. Cat Noir interrupted, shaking his head. How are you supposed to know what I'm feeling if I don't tell you? I should have confronted you with the problem instead of walking out like that. Ladybug smiled. Well, the important thing is you're back. And you're never going to do that to me ever again, right? Cat Noir nodded, his eyes glistening earnestly. Never, milady. They sat quietly for a moment, looking out over the sunset. Then Ladybug couldn't resist teasing him a bit after all he'd put her through. You know, Clag found another cat holder for me while you were gone. His head jerked up, and she knew she'd caught his attention. He was really something. He impressed me right from the start. He knew all about keeping identities secret, how to deal with a villain, and even figured out it was a sending monster before I did. So observant, an excellent fighter, quick thinker too. She snuck a mischievous glance in his direction as she noticed him shifting uncomfortably before she continued pretending to stare dreamily off into the sky. He was so polite, intelligent, thoughtful, handsome. She wanted to kick herself for that last part. She hadn't meant to make the color rise in her own cheeks, and quickly cut her teasing short. But no one could ever replace you, Cat Noir. She turned and looked sincerely at him. You've been with me ever since the very first day. I wouldn't even be here if it wasn't for you. No one's perfect, and we both make mistakes. We help each other through them and become all the stronger for it. Cat Noir nodded with a smile, but Ladybug noticed his eyes were still filled with doubt. Hey. She nudged his arm and he looked up at her attentively. I know it's been hard adjusting to a whole team instead of just the two of us. I really appreciate how wholeheartedly you do things, even when they seem small. Your cataclysm is often key to winning battles, and it definitely plays a significant role in my plans. But you're more than just your power, Cat Noir. I rely on you. Your courage, your confidence, even your jokes. You balance me in more than just our superpowers. When I'm too serious, you make it seem fun. When I focus on the details, you see the bigger picture. And when all seems lost, you never give up. You're smart, resourceful, kind. And without you, I don't think I could do this. She glanced down and fiddled slightly with her fingers. I'm sorry I don't always act like it. I know I've been leaving you out more lately, and that has nothing to do with you. It's just a lot of things have changed since I became the Guardian. Cat Noir had been watching her in amazement, his face glowing with every new word of praise. Now it faded slightly, and he asked hesitantly, why do you say we have to follow rules that no one else does? I don't mind being sidelined in your plans as much, since they always work anyway, and the mission is what's most important. What bothers me is that I've always followed everything you told me, but then to find out you're doing stuff behind my back, the very things you tell me to avoid, it doesn't make sense. His voice softened. I trust you, Ladybug, and I know you're only trying to do what's best, but it doesn't seem fair. She noticed he avoided mentioning Rena and Carapace, and wasn't sure if she should commend him or scold him for it, but she knew that wasn't the main problem anyway. Kitty. She covered his hand lightly with hers, as she had done in a similar conversation not too long ago. We're not going to lose each other. Protecting our identities doesn't threaten, but rather makes sure of that. All it takes is for one of us to get akumatized, and then we both be revealed to Shadow Moth. It's safer this way. For now, but once we defeat him, we won't have to hide anymore. And I promise we'll be able to find each other, forever and always. She squeezed his hand gently, and he looked over at her with a smile. You're right, milady. With you as the Guardian, I'm sure it won't take long. You're amazing, Ladybug. She pulled her hand back and shrugged her shoulders, but he continued earnestly. You find a solution in things that no one else could. You stand up for people and keep fighting even when it seems like the whole world is against you. You're clever and determined, but also compassionate and always willing to see the good in everyone. I know you have a lot on your shoulders, and often it's really hard. But somehow you manage to carry it all and inspire others to follow your lead. And while you were taking care of everyone, he stood up and held his hand out to her. I'll take care of you. She met his eyes as he pulled her to her feet, and a small smile slipped across her face. Thank you, Cat Noir. He smiled back at her, then reached to grab a stick from behind his back. Shall we? She nodded with a knowing smile, and the two jumped off, making their way through Paris as they began their nightly patrol. Ladybug swung deftly over the city streets, following closely behind Cat Noir as he vaulted himself across with his stick. She shook her head fondly at his gleeful exclamations of "Whee!" And as she watched him, she felt a wholeness grow in her heart. Her little kitty had finally come home. Thanks for listening, and I hope you have a wonderful day.